Hey friends, welcome back to the Living Truth Podcast. This is Michael Carey with Kristin Carey today. Back in the studio with our Marriage Unplugged Part 2 episode here. And you have some pretty awesome questions that you were just reading to me here.
Yeah, this is a standalone episode, but I do recommend you listen to the first part about our marriage also, if you haven't already. So here, we're going to just dive right in. Oh, but first, friends, if you haven't rated or reviewed our podcast, would you please take a moment to do that? That helps more people find the help that we offer for people with unwanted sexual behavior and people seeking healing from betrayal. Okay, so what are some emotional or spiritual yellow flags that show us we're headed towards disconnection in our marriage?
Emotional or spiritual?
Yeah, yellow flags. I can start. I think right away when I go into criticism, judgment, and blame. When I start having a narrative in my mind, because usually at least I'm mature enough to not immediately launch into verbal criticism, judgment, and blame because I've grown that much. So it usually starts in my head, right? It's the story that I tell myself about Michael and his motives, about what he is or isn't doing and why he is or isn't doing some things. When those thoughts are in a posture of criticism, judgment, and blame, that's when I can say, okay, I've got a yellow flag here. This is going to snowball unless we address it and deal with it. Anything you want to say about those, the three: criticism, judgment, blame, or other yellow flags that you can see?
Well, I was just thinking about with our counselor, we were talking about it the last episode, and one of the things that he suggested was when we move out of being curious about the world, about, in this case, about your behavior. So that would be another yellow flag. Moving away from being curious, which could be judgment, criticism, blame, defensive-ness, self-protection. Any of those things are yellow flags. So in my right mind, if no matter how you're doing, even if you are criticizing, judging, blaming me, if you are having a bad day for reasons that don't involve me, whatever it is, sometimes, even if it's that, I might make assumptions it's about me, and that's self-protection, really, trying to predict what the fallout is going to be and brace for impact. Anything that's not just being curious about, like, oh my gosh, you look like you're having a rough time or whatever. But even if I say that, this is how tricky it could be. Even as I just said that, I realized you could interpret that as I'm being judgmental.
No, but it's micro expressions on your face that told me that right now, when you said that, you said it with a posture of care and concern on your face. And I can read that.
Instead of you're having a rough day.
There are times where you would say that to me.
What is wrong with you?
And it would look, the look on your face. And we've both done all this parts work, right? With internal family systems, the idea that we have these younger parts in us that react to each other, wounded younger parts that sometimes act really big and powerful, but they're actually wounded little inner children. And so when I'm acting from one of those more immature, regressed parts, I will likely not be able to show up for you in any kind of a way that is legitimately curious and caring. It'll be more out of self-protection or, in my case, as a pleaser. Because that is a lot of my injury and my core wounds involve doing anything and everything to make other people happy, to brace for impact, and to prepare and defend myself against fallout.
Yeah,
it happens before I have any conscious thought. It's how I'm wired. And you have your patterns of reactivity when you're regressed, which would involve what? Do you want to out one of yours? I'm not going to out your immature patterns to our audience. I'll let you do that for yourself.
That would be judgmental, wouldn't it?
I could do it from a posture of curiosity, but I just don't feel like it's my place to reveal.
Yeah. Where do I start? Well, the judgment, the criticism, the blame, those are unfortunately foundational family system stuff from our family of origin, I should say. Yeah. The root of all of that. So, while we grew up in different families and there were a lot of different dynamics, those were the themes in both of our families in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so that comes out in both of us.
Mm-hmm.
We regress back into some of those old patterns from childhood that we used. And in childhood, as children, they might have been helpful to survive. And the thing is, they just don't work as adults. They cause more harm than good, right?
Yeah. And especially harm to ourselves. Like when either of us is in our regressed state, in a regressed inner child state, we are actually in a ton of pain deep down underneath.
Yeah. So what covers a lot of those things up? Fear, anger, control. Sure. Yeah, it could be any one of those things. So it just depends on the day and what all's going on and what the theme is, and So any of those things. We've been in situations where we've both have been in that childlike state and just going back and forth and back and forth. And
you did it. No, you did it. No, you did it. I mean, like, we don't actually say that, but that's the, find the bad guy is one of the emotionally focused therapy, cycles, right? You're the bad one. No, you're the bad one. Like, that's a pattern, right? And of course, it sounds far more sophisticated than that because we don't act like children verbally. It's more emotionally regressed.
I don't know. I think that if we spliced in the nanny cam right now, the audience might say, "No, they look like they're 3-year-olds on a playground." I mean, I processed this with our counselor. Maybe he's listening to this.
Like episode. You processed one of our fights?
Yeah, and I told him,
to be clear, too, tell the audience what we mean by a fight, because the first time I told you we had a fight when we were early married, you were like, "That was not a fight."
A fight when we're going back and forth as children on the playground,
right?
We're just,
but we're not screaming or anything,
right? We're arguing about something. In my childhood growing up, my father was a screamer, and some of that was just told. I don't have vivid memories necessarily of a lot of that, but that. The version of a fight. And so just to identify what you're talking about, when you said we just had a fight, I was like, that wasn't a fight. Are you kidding me? I mean, that was just a small disagreement. Well, small disagreement is fight. So, that's another interesting
Sometimes it's
dynamic.
Not a small disagreement, but it's like we are like at an impasse with hearing and seeing each other, but we just don't escalate into screaming or getting violent or emotionally abusive.
But it's just another dynamic of why marriage can be so tricky, to identify that we both have stuff from the past, just even how we define what is a fight, what is not a fight, what is a vacation supposed to look like, what's Christmas supposed to look like, do we open our presents on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, or at what point, how many can we open the day before? All of these little things that we have, these patterns, these traditions, all of it is a potential disagreement. Anyway, just an interesting thought. But what I was talking about, I went to our counselor and I was describing this back and forth that we did, and I just told him, I said, it sounds like we were both 3-year-olds, and I know that you would be okay with me saying that. It wasn't judgmental. It was in that posture like you just identified a minute ago, where I was talking about just describing it to him like I, it was one of those cases where we just couldn't get out of it in the moment. There have been other times, though, that we've been in that situation, and maybe one of us has been able to find our way out back into that curious state, right? Sometimes maybe it's only possible with the help of Holy Spirit to just help guide us and show us that young person that we're really talking to, that we're dealing with, and to move from judgment, criticism, blame to curiosity and compassion is the key to switch from it being an argument to us hearing each other. And it's when we're both 3-year-olds, it's like, well, you didn't hear me. Well, you're not listening to me, and you're not hearing me on this part. No, you're just not, if you only did this. And it's just children in adult bodies. I like Eddie Caparucci's book, Going Deeper, and the cover of it, I can't remember where what that picture is actually from, but it's the skeleton piece of the adults looking away from each other and the children that are inside of the adult's body, with their hands pressed up against one another like this, trying to reach each other. And while I love that picture, it seems like it's just the opposite, It's our adults that are trying to reach each other with these little children inside of us that are going, you did it, and we're just, it's the children that are running away.
Yes, yes. And I do want to just give a little disclaimer that if you're listening to this podcast and you're in early stages of discovery or disclosure of sexual secrets in your marriage, whether you're the one with the sexual secrets or you're the betrayed spouse, keep in mind, a lot of the topics we're discussing right now about our marriage may not be relevant to you where you're at right now. So let's say you're the one who had the sexual secrets and you're listening to this and thinking, boy, my betrayed spouse is really, really regressed right now because they're doing a ton of criticism, judgment, and blame. Well, you don't get to pull that card right now. First of all, you don't get to judge them. If they're reacting with a lot of anger and energy and criticism, judgment, and blame, it is likely because they're traumatized by your sexual secrets. And so this episode and what we're discussing right now, these are kind of more your marriage issues that are in a season of just typical marriage problems and issues that are related to both people just having some trauma from their childhood. It is not appropriate to one size fits all, take the things we're talking about and say to your betrayed spouse, why can't you be more curious and compassionate towards me? You don't get to play that card when you're the one that just revealed sexual secrets. That's not the order of the day. Yeah.
Well, just what you said, why can't you be more compassionate? That's not curious. That's judgment.
It is. Yeah. We can even use the language of these things, but have it be shrouded in immaturity, in demand. Right. Oh, that's another yellow flag.
Demand.
When either of us feels entitled or demanding that my need be met. And even when you want to lift up out of it even more, when my need is actually, it's not a legitimate need in terms of what I'm demanding, but it's actually rooted in a self-protective posture of entitlement. And that is a big problem for a lot of people with unwanted sexual behavior, right? Like, let's just take sex, for example. If somebody says, this is my need and I need it, and if you don't give this to me, then, I'm going to act out or whatever, like that is so toxic, because typically what needs to actually happen is the person who demands that their need be met actually is the one who has an immaturity thing that they need to look at. Yeah. Really, is that really a need? Or are you demanding something that you feel entitled to? And that is a maturity issue.
Well, yeah, definitely. And that is like a crack addict saying, I need my hit. I need the crack. This is addictive behavior at its finest, saying I need that. So we go off on a lot of different tangents on talking about the healthy sexuality in marriage and what that really looks like. But maybe we can cover that at a later date at some point.
Let's move on through the rest, because I have these other questions that you thought were good. So I'm going to read the next one.
Well, I just want to say to your point about couples that are earlier on, I think we covered a little bit about that in the last episode, and talking a little bit more about betrayal and what that looks like at different stages of the marriage. And this it depends. I think a lot of couples will benefit from this, who whatever stage they happen to be in. Certainly the early stages of betrayal is not they're not going to be working on these kind of things, but wherever they're at, when they're working on reconciliation and they're getting to a place where they both can start to really hear each other and see each other, unpacking the issues within the marriage and what the things that we both contribute to the marriage. When you're in a place where you can start to work on that, I think, some of the objective of us doing these podcasts is just to show people that, wherever you're at, there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of growth to
normalize the fact that we have a lot of brokenness, no matter what stage of recovery we're at.
Right.
That needs to be healed.
Yeah. So stick with it long term. Those questions, how long is this going to take? Those kind of questions when it comes to repairing and fleshing out a lot of the problems, these kind of problems in the marriage that we're talking about. I think that was another thing too. We didn't put a timeline on it. We didn't say like, you better stop being judgmental by next Thursday or else. That's childish, isn't it, by itself?
Well, yeah. And it's so nuanced. What does that mean? And where is it coming? Where does judgment come from? Oh my gosh, we could go down a rabbit trail. So the next question is, as we recall the past couple of months, because I think both of us have individually and in our marriage grown a ton in the last couple of months. What do you think has unlocked or made possible the most significant breakthroughs? I would like to start answering that question, because here's what just came to my mind is pain, like loss, difficulty, struggles of life. Pain is often the gateway to being motivated enough and willing enough to see the things that we can actually change. Because there's things in our lives we can't change. We have no power to change other people or circumstances, but we can change the way we think, the story we tell ourselves, our lens or perspective through which we see the world. And I know for me, for one, like in the last couple of months, my eyes have been open to ways in which I had a narrative about you and some of the difficult points in our relationship that was false. And that I have been able to move through that, release that, and realize there is another layer and level of truth that I did not have access to before. So that's just one of many things for me, working on a lot on my mindset too, and what I tell myself over and over again, what I allow myself to think about life in general, right? And that release from that burden of telling myself, gosh, this is really hard. Gosh, life is really hard. Gosh, this is so difficult, over and over again, to stop telling myself that and start focusing more and more on the gifts and the beauty has really made a difference in my emotional energy and my ability to show up for a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what about you? What do you think has unlocked or made possible the most significant breakthroughs in our marriage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that just the revelation that we need to continue working on ourselves to be, honestly, just to be content with the fact that there's going to be problems and we're going to work through it. The belief, the hope, that's been a breakthrough in a lot of ways. That's just, I think it helps each individual occurrence, when we get caught up in these childish, fights or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, I think it makes it easier to come out of it on the other side in a positive way, to work through it, even in the moment, to figure things out, to start to hear each other. It really has helped me a lot to just know, have that reassurance that we're going to figure this out, no matter how hard it seems in the moment. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's huge. And all of the years of counseling and coaching and all of the repair that we've done, it all kind of drives knowing that we both continue to work on ourselves. And so without being demanding about things getting better, right? Just knowing that things are getting better. The track record is the trajectory is in such a positive direction, Yeah, there's that. And then understanding my own brokenness more and more and more. It's, and I said this in previous episodes too, was, the more that I learned about myself, the more I realized that I didn't really know as much about myself as I thought I did. So that, but it is true. The more that I realize the junk that the stinking thinking that's still there, all of that really helps me unravel it and get back to that place of curiosity.
And I'm going to say something else too that I think you're going to super resonate with. That just came up for me is like the pursuit of God. And I'm not talking about like be more religious, read your Bible more, check the boxes. I am talking about life-giving, deep soul connection, oneness with God. So being in constant contact with God, being in constant conversation and leaning into Him, pursuing Him and surrendering my will and my demands to God. I know that you do the same thing because we talk about it, right? And we pray and like are united in this concept of experiencing more and more of God's love, His care, His fatherly presence, ever presence in our lives, right? And both of us on our own, walking a spiritual path, allowing Jesus to lead us closer to God, closer to His original design for us, right? And it's this long process of leaning into His ways, which are completely different from our own. So the way for me to maturity is by holding the hand of my Father and allowing Him to lead me and to heal me. Like all of the things that we've talked about, right? None of this healing is just by virtue of self-will. It comes by surrender and what you described of like realizing I thought I knew a lot about myself, but I actually really don't. It's humility. And we tell women all the time when you're looking to see, is your husband really changing or not? Is he broken, open, and willing? Those are the signs, right? And for me too, am I broken, open, and willing? Am I seeking to have God be God of my life instead of me trying to be in control of my small little world? And the more that I surrender to the care of God and to God's will and to listening to His voice and doing His will, the less we knock into each other with our egos and our pride and our arrogance and our immaturity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I like how you started by saying, not the religious thing that you might think of when you talk about God, but the idea that we have to be open, like what is our part and what is God's part in all of that? Yeah, He brings about the change, but surrender is really that I need to stop trying to figure out what is the pathway to change all the time. I need to be open to whatever His way is.
Yeah.
He gets to decide the ways in which my healing is going to come about. What does that look like from one experience to the next. And I need to be open to that change. I need to be hungry for the change. It's okay to be searching for the change, but ultimately I don't get to decide the path that that change comes about, the mechanism. And that, unfortunately, a lot of the change comes about through that pain that you mentioned. And I still don't like that.
No, me neither.
But
not a fan.
I know that I can work through that, So that's it. Being open to what is healing, what is going to help me grow, And it's not always in the path of pain, though, necessarily. I mean, there's joy as well. But the real pathway to that openness to healing, unfortunately, does come through pain. A lot of it does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And yet, at the same time, we have to increase our joy strength. So as a couple and as individuals, if all we do is lean into let's deal with this pain and push through it and go to counseling and do all the, if we grit our teeth and white knuckle our way into, I'm going to do this, darn it. First of all, that's self-will instead of surrender to God. Never helpful in the long run. I mean, having tenacious endurance is important, but we also are doing that with surrender. But if we don't take breaks from the intensity and the difficulty to do things that are fun, joyful, life-giving, then we will run out of steam really quick. And so, we've got our bike rides, right? Every weekend we try, in the warm weather, we are trying to get on our bikes together and enjoy, because we love riding through the farms and the when the weather's beautiful and looking at the sky and the clouds and noticing just the beauty of creation and enjoying conversation with each other. We also go on a date once a week, where typically we might go out to breakfast or lunch. We just spend some time, especially in the warmer months, sitting outside and talking and connecting. Putting times for joy and fun into our marriage is essential to have that stamina to make it through the brokenness of life.
Mm-hmm.
Any other practices you can think of that are important for us to maintain a healthy marriage?
I think active listening to God, the two-way journaling process, hearing God's voice, that's been really paramount. And we've talked over and over about counseling, but, it just needs to be said again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the joy, we've looked at other hobbies that we could do together, going for walks, and really compromise, in a lot of those things too. What does it look like, right? Sometimes I don't want to walk as fast as you do. I can't always keep up with you, right? The compromise. I do need the exercise, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. You're going to slow down a little bit. Simple things, where we connect over things that we need. We both need exercise, and we both need that time together. So there's a lot of different practices. But I was thinking about the pain, circling back to that. When we talk about growth through pain, knowing the audience and the pain that so many of these people are going through, what other kind of pain, what maybe can you give some examples? What does it look like? What pain do you think facilitates a lot of growth? What can you describe what that looks like?
What pain? Like what sources of pain?
Yeah. What is it? When we talk about, of course, when I said knowing the audience or thinking about the betrayal trauma,
right,
is painful.
It
right?
is.
And
I see where you're going with this.
There is some growth, I'm sure, that a woman can experience when she goes through betrayal trauma.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Of all the things that she can learn from that, and how broken people are, how broken her spouse is, there's so many different things, but that's when we talk about growth, experiencing growth through pain, I was just thinking, what other examples are there besides that?
Oh gosh, so many. I mean, in general, I think when we realize the way that our brokenness is contributing to or a factor in the painful situations in our lives, and that pain gets big enough that we are willing to look at ourselves and how we're contributing to a painful cycle, that's when we become willing to change. When the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing, then that motivates us to want to change, right? So if I can notice, oh, it's my perspective about this, or the story I'm telling myself, the lens through which I'm looking at this, the lies that I believe, is creating a level of pain that is, I can't live like this anymore. Then I become motivated to address it and deal with it and change.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, something that I was thinking about when I proposed the question was when we experience events from today that remind us of the past, where we are moving back into feeling trauma from our childhood, from the past. That's a big piece of it, I think, too.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that will unearth that old pain, bring it to the surface, if you will, which can enable us to heal it in the right environment.
Because, the material, the book, the body keeps the score, I think it is, or whatever it is. The nervous system stores trauma, the pain from the past, that when it's triggered, it feels like it's today. It feels like it's 100% happening today, because that part of the brain that stores trauma doesn't know space and time. Like, I'm not going to name all the different parts of the brain science, but you know what I'm talking about. Just the idea that it's feels 100% like it's happening today, but so much of the pain that we're feeling is from the past, from our childhood, and it's just being triggered. And so
if it's hysterical, it's historical.
Right. So it's pain that we didn't get a chance to experience and feel when we were kids, and that pain has to come out in order for us to grow, doesn't it?
It does. And just recently, I was so triggered and said, I feel like everything's going to fall apart. And you were able to sit there with me and validate my pain, because you knew where it was coming from in my past, in my childhood. And you were able to reassure me, not in a judgmental way, but in a caring way. I know it feels like that, but it's not going to. I'm here. You reminded me of God being here. And I was able to move through my pain more quickly because you could tell, I know you could tell I was in a regressed state when I was triggered. And you were there for me without judging me.
Yes. I love to have those wins. But I'm going to say it's a lot easier to do that when I'm not the source of pain.
If I'm triggered by you, then you become, your tendency would be for your protectors to rise up and be defensive. And so it's good and it's easier to be there for me. But I will say part of why I came to you with my trigger and my pain and my panic was because of the trust that we have established, in that I knew you wouldn't judge me for the way I was reacting emotionally, but that you could have the capacity to actually care for me and be there for me in it and support me.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, friends, thank you so much for listening. There is hope. No matter how far broken we feel, there is hope. Take breaks. Spend some time focusing on things that are beautiful and joyful.
Find another really great counselor if you don't already have one.
Yes.
And that is huge. Christian counselors that specialize in betrayal trauma and sexual brokenness, all of that. But IFS and EFT, I think that there's a way that the listeners can find specialists, people, counselors that have those certifications and those things somewhere on some website.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, we're holding out hope for you.
Amen.